429, 429, 429, 429, 429,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Darling, it's the Shy Life podcast.
Yes, but it's a positive thing, Paul. The high life, the shy life.
You won't find a cast of characters like this everywhere.
Hello, Paul.
Delicious.
This particular episode of The Shy Life is a little more abstract than usual.
Oh,
Okay, looks like the hairy guy is ready to record. 3, 2, 1.
Go Shy Yeti.
Oh, I hope he hasn't found out my secret. I think he has.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Shy Life podcast with me, Paul the Shy Yeti. How are you doing? Oh, I'm all right. I've got Nick here. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm the not so shy Bigfoot.
Yeah, we have had I can't remember what I should do. I can't remember what he was called now. But we did have a very bold Bigfoot or something, didn't we? Stills is here. I really should. But to the fans of the show, are going.
Fans of the show probably know more than we would.
Yeah, well, he did get sent off to another dimension. It hasn't been seen for about 3 years. But
As you do. Actually, isn't that against the rules of lockdown? Are other dimensions actually? Are you allowed to go to other dimensions in the current lockdowns?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But he went there. He went there before it started, so I guess he gets to stay there. So anyway, this time we're going to do a slightly different episode. Well, of course we are. We're not going to do a repeat performance of a previous one. But
since you liked it so much, we're going to do it all over again.
Yeah, imagine it's like repertory theatre.
That's right.
We'll just remember that episode we did about the music of 1975? Well, we're going to do it again today.
We probably could do it actually again. We probably could.
Don't go away, listeners. No, we won't tell you what we're going to be doing. We're going to run the theme music, and when we come back, we will tell you what our plan for this episode is. I'm very excited.
It's time for my old buddy, old pal from across the channel, across the pond, Paul Chandler, the Shy Yeti.
He's not that shy. Oh, it's the Shy Life podcast. Yeah.
All I wanted was a pie.
And then I hatched out of an egg. Okay, bring the mic over. He's ready to record.
It's the quiet ones you've got to watch, you know.
Is it metaphorical? Is it deep? Is it deep?
Boy, he's not all that shy is right.
Blimey, Governor. It's the Shy Life podcast.
If you thought that was bad, just listen to this.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait for it to begin.
It's the Shy Life podcast.
He's positively glowing.
Hello, and we're back. So, yes. Now, my plan for this episode is, well, it's a weird one, but you won't be surprised about that. But I'm sure you've all heard about word association and, you know, how, and this isn't quite word association, or at least the theory of word association. It's more using words to see what it triggers between Nick and I as far as conversation is
Yes, because if it was word association, there might be a thing. What does this word remind you of? Sex. Or we might some things might come out of the work we don't want on primetime TV or primetime podding. This way we have a safety valve where we can actually think about it before we.
Yes, yeah. So and also sometimes word association is just you say one word and then the next word you say it's just another word. You don't have a conversation about it.
That's right. Yeah.
We want to have a conversation. So, but what I have found is a website that randomly generates words because I particularly like the randomness because otherwise it feels like I might have find certain words, or I might have, that's what, like when we've done episodes where we've done random film years, it was always more enjoyable for
if it comes left field.
Yeah, because I could select the years, and it would be a surprise to you, but it wouldn't be a surprise to me. I want to be surprised as well. So what I thought, the website I've got, I thought we'd start with just single words, but then as we go on, we can even do 2 or 3. I don't know if that'll just complicate things, but if it does, then we can always go back.
Well, let's do it anyway.
Yeah. So, I will start the first word. Well, there's a word already on the screen, so we'll go for that. And I really not quite sure, or I'm really intrigued as to what memory this might trigger. But the word is bacon.
Bacon. Ooh, bacon. There's a few things here. I remember in a science lesson, Kevin Reeves, who's now a dog breeder, turns around saying, "I've got a silly joke." And this is at school. How do you make smoky bacon? Set fire to a pig. Which is not terribly funny, but it's probably gleefully back then. Bacon, this is something I like. I like it crispy. I certainly like. I have frazzles for lunch.
I like frazzles. I like frazzles. Yeah. Somebody recently asked me what my favourite flavour of crisp was, and although I don't have crisps that often, I still wouldn't say no to a packet of frazzles.
As I say, it's one of those things. I usually, if it's breakfast-wise, we'd only have bacon if we were on holiday, I think, or occasionally, if as a whim on Ali's part, I would have bacon. Yeah.
Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but was there a cafe called the Bacon Sandwich in Salisbury, or am I imagining that? Or maybe I'm thinking of some. I just felt like there was it was the name of a cafe I used to go into, but I'm presuming it's Salisbury. But,
yes, it is the Bacon Sandwich. Yes, it was round about when the early days of the films. We did. There was. I don't know what it was before, but now it's my favourite Indian restaurant, the Kathmandu Kitchen. But
the one near the station.
Yeah,
the one near the station in Salisbury.
That's the one. You and I.
Yeah.
I'm sure must have eaten there, had a drink in there many times. My main memory of the bacon sandwich when it was the bacon sandwich, because I think this is before it went 50s. It went into sort of a 50s diner look after this, but during the bacon sandwichy time, I remember we used to go in there after filming. I think probably, no doubt we were there for a Sutton Park, but I do know that we were there for after Inquisition in Law and also Child of Anubis during the shoot, because dear departed Jill Shattuck, my girlfriend at the time, was in there with us because she was attending the recordings, and Keith was there, and she and Keith had a Dalek fight with their Coke cans. And for some reason, Jill's Dalek was American. But it was a lovely, lovely cafe, yes. And I used to go in there with Tina as well.
I also think that it was before all that. I think maybe in the 80s it was called Meg's Caf. Or certainly Meg's Caf was in I can only think of was in that same sort of area. But I remember that because other Paul, or Paul from school, who appears on this show on occasion, his grandma was called Meg. So it was a bit of, I think it was a bit of a, we used to sort of joke it was her cafe, although it wasn't her cafe.
A bacon sandwich, actually, now you come to mention it, bacon sandwich, I think would be one of my favourite associations with bacon, because it was a lovely, lovely calf, and it's still a lovely, it's as soon as lockdown's over, we'll be going in there to have an Indian meal. We're really looking forward to it. But but it was a great little stop off if you were filming. I think we planned to go there with after Run Fast in the World, but it didn't. It didn't work out. But it was a nice stop off, and particularly nice if it was like, I think I might be making this up, but when you and I used to go sort of on train journeys and things like that, if we had a little time to spare, that's exactly the place we would stop off for a cup of tea or something or coffee before we headed off. So I mean, it was great. Bacon.
No, I don't think we need. I mean, we can move on to a different word now. I think that's unless you have lots of other.
No, I don't think so.
No,
it's a flavour.
Yeah.
Obviously, as the listeners have probably gathered, I'm not actually a vegetarian, but I do like bacon, I must admit.
But no, it's funny I'd not thought about the bacon sandwich. I mean, that's partly why I wanted to do this episode. I've not thought about the bacon sandwich for years, and it just suddenly came into my head.
It's a hell of a key to unlock all sorts of things.
Yeah. Right, let's see what another word we might come up with. We'll just stick with just single ones at the moment. Right. Oh, this is going to generate some good discussions. The word is not pub, but inn. INN.
Inn.
Which is, you could say, was this? We could. I think we could probably use that as a sort of pub. I was thinking of sort of. Around 1994, because I've been editing the episode that we recorded about the music of 1994. That was my year when I was in Salisbury a lot for my work placement, and we certainly did a lot of inns or pubs in that time. Pubs in Salisbury, including the pub that's near the top of the road by my parents, which is no longer a pub at all, but the Stag. We used to play pool.
Lovely Stag. Every time when I go to your parents, sometime, obviously when you're there, when we meet up and exchange tapes, I always feel crestfallen when I look at what's become of the Stag now. It's all boarded up. Even before COVID, it's all boarded up and looking sad. But yeah, I mean, I suppose pub. Inevitably, I gravitate towards pubs. In terms of when it's in, obviously the Railway Inn is a very big part of my life. I grew up next door to it for the first 10 years of my life. It's now a big part of my life because in peacetime, as it were, it's my regular. The Railway Inn is also called the Dust Hole, but its other name is the Railway Inn. Tollgate Inn, which is no more, which was just down the other road, the other side of Tollgate Road, which is where you and I and Andrew Dexter and Callum and various friends spent my wedding eve. We went in for a quick drink before they closed on the night before I got married, which was very, very nice, very pleasant memory. In the Jamaica Inn, obviously it was a play, but also I have been in the real Jamaica Inn, which is in Cornwall, when I went down shortly after Jill died, and I went there with her parents and her friend Sarah, and it's interesting.
I read Jamaica Inn, the book by Daphne du Maurier, but I haven't visited the location.
I have some pickies actually. I might when this episode goes out, I have to remind myself. But I have a picture of the board, the board outside.
I can't really think of pubs that other than ones you may have mentioned, which I've been in with you. I don't know many pubs with the name in them, but going back to that 1994, I can remember the sort of pubs we used to go into. We used to go into the Cloisters. That's sort of on the quite near my old school, I suppose, quite near the grammar school.
Near Bishop's was it's not there anymore, but the Ship Inn. That sticks in my mind when we went to Smite, the young communicants group that I was part of, where I met Danny. We were meeting up with a new leader there in 1986, and that was where we met. And she came out to meet us around there, and the Ship Inn was still there. I think it's some B&B now, but there's the inn, this and in that. I'm just trying to think of an inn that's. Well, I don't suppose there's such a thing as an inn that isn't a pub. But it's a nice name for a pub, an inn. It's kind of got to kind of suggest a certain history.
There must be a few in Salisbury.
A sort of this is people have been coming here for years.
I can't remember whether really. I'm sure that the technical description of an inn might be an inn is one where you can always stay. Like I might look at a definition in a sec, but. What was I going to say? Because Salisbury is known for its pubs. As far as it has quite a lot per square foot, I suppose. I'm sure certainly in the 90s, there were, it was considered to be a city that had more than its fair share in the nicest possible way.
It absolutely. Because it was. I think they were sort of. The joke was you can't go within a certain a certain distance without finding a pub.
It says the actual definition of an inn is a pub, typically one in the country, in some cases providing accommodation. So it's not always. So certainly the one in Jamaica Inn was the only inn for miles. Which sort of fits with that sort of the idea of it being in the country and things.
That's the key thing. I think that's what gives the name a certain elegance and a certain gravitas.
Let's see another word. See what it brings us. The next word we have is the word essay.
Essay. Do you want to start us off on this?
Yeah, I still sometimes have, and I think even just the other day, I had a dream where I was still at university, and I had an essay to finish, and I was sort of rushing, getting distracted with things, and I think I still have that. I don't think I ever was late for writing an essay, even when I was at university. I've always said that I certainly wouldn't want to do like what our mutual friend Harry did and do an MA and go back to. I know you did your studies later on in your 20s, but you had a nice break before you went back to studying, whereas I feel like I would never want to do that, because I still get nightmares about writing essays and meeting deadlines, and the weird thing is, as I say, I was never late for a deadline. But I still almost say it was like a recurring nightmare where I don't know where it comes from now, but I still almost have a memory of what probably was a dream of being late for coursework and failing an exam or sort of, which never actually happened. So I can only think it must. When I had this dream the other night, it reminded me of that, and I thought, actually, well, but that never happened. I never failed my university course because I didn't finish an essay or coursework. But so when I think of the word essay, it kind of it's funny how it sort of brings up not even real life study, but I certainly remember when I was doing my A-levels, it was very annoying that you got to do lots of coursework, and I always did very well with my coursework, and then on one of my subjects it was most of the subjects, I mean, you only do 3 subjects really. You only do 3 subjects when you're doing A levels, but mostly. But 2 of the subjects, the coursework went towards the final exam, and then there was an exam. But with one of my subjects, you did all that coursework, and then actually it had no bearing on what happened, and you did the exam, and that was 100% the result. And of course, with one subject, I did completely muck up the exam, and then failed 2 years worth of work when otherwise I got a really good mark for coursework and for essays and things. So I looking back, I still sort of resent the fact that why was that the case with that subject when the other subjects. So it tends to be negative connotations. And I certainly did a lot of essays when I was at university, and it also brought up for me that there were some lecturers that I knew who possibly weren't their decisions about marks were maybe linked to more than just the piece of work, because I'm sure I've told this connected to Sutton Park, that I did a local studies project about Sutton Park when I was doing my local studies module of my library degree, which basically meant that I went to the local Sutton Coldfield library and I went through lots of newspaper articles of things that were very ephemeral, things that had happened, like events that happened, and I wrote a sort of social history of Sutton Park. I can't remember what the year, sort of, probably between the 60s and 90s or whatever was available. And so it was original work, and it was great because it allowed me to go into Sutton Park and take photos to illustrate, whilst I was then also allowed me to just get on with recording Sutton Park, and I could sort of say it was all for work, for school, for college work. And then at the end of when I handed it in, I got a reasonable amount. I got a above average mark, but the lecturer said, "Have a look at this piece of work," and I looked at it, and you could clearly see that the student had just got the Sutton Park guide that you can buy in a shop, chopped it up, and stuck the pictures from the guide, because you could see the words that they had written on the backside of the photos, and they just handed in basically. And so how on earth this lecturer could have given that person like an A grade? I mean, obviously I was a bit of an expert on Sutton Park. I saw it immediately, but I can only think that lecturer and that student had a very friendly relationship for him to give her such a really high mark. Everything was totally plagiarised, and I showed it to my other student colleagues, and said, "Look, he's showing me this piece of work as if it's a good piece of work, and it's just a hack job." We didn't say anything because we thought that could affect any future essays we handed in to this lecturer if we'd made him look an idiot. Because it wasn't somebody who was currently on the course; it was a couple of years old at that point. So essays, it brings up some bitter memories in a way. But hopefully you've got something a bit more positive to say.
Well, I've got something a bit more jolly. Sorry, I have to say, hopefully this will come out okay, but connectivity-wise, I'm getting about 3 seconds of you and 3 seconds of silence, and 3 seconds of you and 3 seconds of silence. So if you interject at any point and I seem to be ignoring you, please forgive me. But yeah, I'm going to, essay definitely some memories. Nothing is accomplished as what you've said, but down in the Highbury days of 1981-82, we had a form tutor called Mrs. Christensen, who I have to say looked great in jeans. So she was positively the only form tutor I had, and the only year I had where that did look good in jeans. So everybody else was grumpy old men. But with essays. Now, I've heard about essays. Well, I only really heard of essays when I went to Highbury, because they were usually they usually equated to punishment if we'd been naughty in class. And for ages, I thought it was SA, two separate words. I thought it was an acronym for something. So I just thought. I wonder what the S and the A stands for. But so in my diary around that time, we got an S. We had it in SA. But Mrs. Christensen, on the outward, it seemed young and trendy and good looking, but she was actually quite a stickler. And at the time, I was landed with a rather naughty class. I mean, that's kind of a glib thing to say, but I was a good boy at school. I've never liked being in trouble. Full stop. I still don't like being in trouble at 52. But they were a bit of a cheeky class, and we kept getting a detention. And Mrs. Christensen used to give us a detention for getting a detention, which I thought was, because it let the class down. And that detention usually consisted of either lunchtime or the tutor group actually writing an essay. And I sat next to a guy called Gary Farmer. He was a Cumbrian and great fun guy. Wasn't one of your alpha males. He was jolly and he was funny and he was enormous entertainment value. Like all good people, he buggered off and was never seen again. But he would write these essays in the form of these kind of almost parable stories about usually featuring the teacher that had given us the detention in a story where they ended up dying horribly. and he would, I think there was. They were always naughty in science because there was a science teacher who was a bit oversensitive and tended to balk at comments about his beard. So he was called Beard for many generations of children. And I think there was an acid test where we were testing some sodium of some description, and it was burning, and we were told if we touch it, we'd turn to soap. I.e., we'd fizzle and dissolve. Now, all the boys kind of interpreted us that we'd suddenly instantly turn into a bar of soap. and Gary wrote this essay where we were naughty and one of the boys touched us and turned into a bar of soap. And in the end, I think somebody lit a fag and it fell into the acid and the lab blew up, Mr. Lee and all. So there was always a parable, whereas the person who got us into trouble in the first place, i.e. the teacher, would read a nasty end. I think Mrs. Christensen was were sort of up to because of the other thing we were. Some of them were told off for running up and down the banks when it was wet and rainy and they get muddy, and Mrs. Christian ended up sinking in the mud and died. And I mean, we got to like her in the end, and then she was taken from us, and we were given to a rather boring steel metalwork teacher for the rest of our duration there. But essays with Mrs. Christensen, I don't think they were ever handed in. I don't think they were ever marked, because poor old Gary would have got a detention for getting a detention because he would have the book would have been absolutely written off. But yeah, he got away with it was enormous. One of my favourite memories of Highbury was those essays and Gary's twist on them. But yeah, that was definitely what essays mean to me.
Cool.
Hello, listeners, it is I, Cuthbert. At this point in the conversation, Paul and Nick began to have some internet problems, which required resolving. We'll leave them to it for a moment and head across to a little quiz that Paul did with our good friend Canadian Ryan. This time it is all about comic book heroes. Let's see how Ryan does, and then we'll return to our advertised topic and share with you a number of other words as a trigger to all manner of chitter-chat.
We've got a little quiz. This is one of these quizzes that kind of editorializes, if you know what I mean. It kind of puts its own little comments in. And you think, oh, that's a bit rude. So we won't do all of these because there's 30 questions. We'll just do the first few. What is Green Lantern's weakness? And it says, aside from Ryan Reynolds and bad CGI.
The color yellow.
Which of these is not a DC Comics villain? Swiss Army Man, Captain Boomerang, Calendar Man, or Clock King?
Oh, it's not a DC villain? Well, Calendar Man and Captain Boomerang are definitely DC. I can't remember for the other two, though.
So Swiss Army Man or Clock King? Do you want to choose one, and we'll just have to see.
Let's go with Swiss Army Man.
What group of heroes is sometimes referred to scientifically as Homo Superior? We do have options.
Homo Superior should be the X-Men, I believe.
Yeah, it's one of the options. Which comic book character has a butler by the name of Edwin Jarvis?
Jarvis is Iron Man's butler.
That was one of the options. What was the name of Superman's dog?
Crypto.
One of the options is Canine. Doctor Who would be very cross if he's stolen Canine. What's the name of the first Robin? I think I can get that one. Well, unless it's something I don't. You've got Dick Grayson, Damian Wayne, Jason Todd, or Tim Drake. Of course, it could be more complicated than I realised.
Well, which one do you think it is?
I would say Dick Grayson, but who knows? There may be an earlier.
It is Dick Grayson. You did get that one.
Yeah, because I thought they might have gone and said, "Oh, right, before Dick Grayson, there is this." Who played Lex Luthor in the original 1978 Superman movie?
In the original 1978?
Yes. You've got Marlon Brando, Jesse Eisenberg, Christopher Reeve, or Gene Hackman. Well, two of those it definitely isn't, because one of them probably was only barely born, and one of them was playing Superman. I thought Marlon Brando might have had a cameo as like his father or something.
So it was Gene Hackman, wasn't it?
Yeah,
this 1978 one.
Yeah, I'm thinking that. We'll do two more.
Sure.
What is the name of the newspaper editor that Peter Parker worked for as a freelance photographer? I can give you options.
Yeah, give me options. I'm blanking on his name.
Perry White, Norman Osborn, Clark Kent. J. Jonah Jameson.
J. Jonah Jameson.
Okay. Oh no, that was question 8. We'll do up to 10. Which comic book hero is sometimes called the Scarlet Speedster?
Scarlet Speedster? It should be the Flash.
Yep, that's one of the options. And the last one, how many times is Selena Kyle, Anne Hathaway, referred to as Catwoman in The Dark Knight Rises?
I don't think she is at all.
Yeah, that's one of the options. Okay, well, there are more questions in here, so hopefully it'll let us. Let's see if you get. We can always use it anyway. What was Daredevil's father's profession? A lawyer, a circus strongman, a welder, or a boxer?
Daredevil's father? Oh, I have no idea.
who's a lawyer. Do you think?
That would sort of make sense, because that's what Daredevil ends up being. So maybe he's following in his dad's footsteps.
Oh, just a minute. I've just realised that it wasn't. It was a boxer. But when I clicked the wrong answer, it told me. So we do know the answers for the other questions. It's just that we didn't get anything wrong. So we don't have to do the whole thing. I just didn't realise that it was. I thought that was because we clicked on them. I just thought it was saying, yes, that's what you clicked on. But because we got that other one wrong, and it said what it really is. So right, we don't have to anymore. So we got 10 out of 10. Although that quiz was rather confusing as to what we were doing. But yes, it looks like we got 10 out of 10. So, oh dear. Well, thank you very much. So our next word, we're still doing just the one word. We'll see how it goes with other words. That could just be confusing. But the next word is pyramid. What does the word pyramid conjure up for you?
Two things immediately. Pyramids of Mars, the Doctor Who adventure, which I watched at the age of 6 and 7, respectively, because I had a birthday. Actually, my birthday fell on episode 2 of the birthday party anyway. But that was a big influence on myself at the time. It was an influential story, a Doctor Who story that stood out for me when I was a baby. Well, not a baby. When I was a child, an infant school child. Scary, but sort of. It's interesting. I watched most of the whole thing, albeit sort of behind the door, around the peeping around the door. But when it came to the repeat, I was still behind the door, because I think I was a bit disconcerted by what I called the foxy face, Sutek's face. And especially when it materialises in the TARDIS, but also pyramids. About 1986, there were two pyramids, confections. There was Pyramids, which had an advert with a mummy advertising it, and I always remember, because I think I was at Manda's at the time, Manda Paints, and we were talking about pyramids because they had the sort of what should we call it? A sort of mint cream in the middle, and one of our Gene, who was one of our rather lugubrious older colleagues, was saying it reminds you of when you're walking first thing in the morning and some of the old boys have been sick on the ground. How to make a beautiful piece of confectionery sound ghastly. A few months later, when I started at NSS, we had there was an apricot version of it in a golden little pod, and I've still got the wrapper from the NS when we started at NSS. It wasn't. I don't think it took off quite so well, and of course neither of them are available anymore. But I thought it was an interesting variation on it. But pyramids will.
Lisa and Toby and I did an episode which should probably be out by the time this goes out, where we did like round the archives university, and we all took subjects that we were supposed to be expert in. Obviously Lisa was history and Toby was science, and I did chocolate bars that have gone out of print or whatever. not print but production. So that sounds like another chocolate that should have been on that list, but and may well have been.
I mean, I think you and I have spoken at length not necessarily on the podcast, but we've certainly had our share of conversations about confectionery. So I always like it when they bring out a different kind of flavour. But yes,
I was because really really, Pyramid. When I think of Pyramid, ironically, but not to us, Pyramids of Mars is the thing I think of. And I think it probably is important to me, not because I saw it at the time. I read the book, but it was one of the first video releases that I had, I think. So I probably watched it far more than than I would normally have done. Probably more than even other episodes that were. I'm not sure when Pyramids of Mars came out. Was the show still running when it came?
The video came out in '85, 10 years after the show was still running. But I remember it was the first video I saw. I didn't have a video recorder at the time, but Fiona, now Alan, and Keith, we all teamed up and we went to Chatwick to see where Awakening was filmed, and we ended the day by going home and watching Pyramids of Mars. It was an enormous thing for me at the time because A, I remembered the story, and B, it was the first Doctor Who video I'd actually seen. So it sounds pathetic compared to some fans, but it was a big deal.
But videos in '85 were very expensive, so I didn't have it then. I probably had it when it became retail, sort of like $9.99 type, probably a few years later. But the other thing I think of, there's two other little things. One would be our friend Andy, who's been on the show, or Andy Ching, I should say, because there's so many Andys who've been on the show. When he did his Child of Anubis, that was all sort of was that the 90s or the early noughties?
It was 95.
That was sort of about Egyptian gods, and the other thing. I'm sure Harry won't mind sharing it with us. He may have even spoken about it himself. But just before the first lockdown, he went to Egypt. I think it was in Egypt, and he went to a pyramid, and he went inside a pyramid, and then very, very much regretted it because apparently it's like lots of shuffleboards, and it's and Harry isn't the slimmest guy, and he got claustrophobia doing it, and he had to go back. I don't know quite how they do it, but I suppose you go in and you come out a different way, but he couldn't progress, so and he caused a lot of trouble because he had to shuffle back out again. I would
almost certainly be the same. Actually, I do sympathise with him.
It sounds awful.
I can get claustrophobia, but I mean, I should have said, oh yes, Egypt and the pyramids of history and things like that. But I always say with Egypt, I don't really have any ambitions for foreign travel, but Egypt, I think, would be a little bit too far for me, and the climate too. If I want to see Egypt, I'll save me bum having several injections in it, and
even if you're very careful, I had a colleague at work who went to a lot of these places like Egypt and stuff, and she enjoyed herself, but every single time she came back, she was off sick with something as a result of or getting over. When she came back, she was getting over a stomach problem. Because even if you're very careful, which she would have been, it's difficult to, you don't really know if people have washed the food in them or
I'm like compared to my dad, I consider myself fairly adventurous with food, but I think even sort of Italy was a bit hard work for me in terms of the food there. But I don't feel that I'd get on with Egypt.
Better with Europe and America. I guess if I ever got as far as Australia, I'd be fine in Australia, except for the heat and maybe the poisonous
spiders.
Yeah. I was reading an article where somebody was saying this was talking about film behind the scenes on filming Sons and Daughters in the 80s, that they went to do a pool scene and they found some sleeping funnel web spiders at the bottom of the pool or something, or presumably they can live underwater, and they had to they had to cancel the filming for the day because
for the whole day.
I don't know if I mean there wasn't much more. I guess they had they needed to do it at that point, or they needed to be in another set later on in the day, and I guess whatever type filming they had to do, they couldn't do it at that, and they had to shuffle things around.
I don't think I could cope with that. Not that I'm particularly arachnophobic. I'm just, obviously I'm not too keen on the big buggers. But also, I think there's a lad at work who is a cricketer, and he went over to do some referee, whatever the training they did, and he came back with many a scary story about spiders. But yeah,
it might be I never get to Australia. I just watch a heck of a lot of it on TV over the years.
You too. It's almost a honorary.
Yeah, but I always think I might. It might spoil my view if I just couldn't. Only because we're not used to the temperatures. We're not used to that. I just don't know if I'd enjoy it as much as I enjoy watching it on TV.
Yes. That's right. I have no intention of going to Australia. I think the only thing that would lure me to Australia would be if because there is supposed to be the chance of it existing anymore is very slim, but there is supposed to be out there a video, like a cine film of my parents' wedding. It's never been located, but if they located it and said, yeah, you can have it, but you'll have to come out here for it. Then I think I probably would go to Australia.
If that happens, I'll go with you because I've always said. I've always said I'd go. I've always said I'd go if I had a travel companion who was also.
That's right. I can't imagine anybody more I'd want with me than you, because I associate you with Australian sense.
Because other Paul, who's on the show, his sister for a while lived in Australia, and I was kind of thought, maybe I'll get to. I could go at least travel with Paul to wherever it is that she lives, but I think her family is because of her husband is sort of a businessman who travels. They relocate to countries a lot, so I don't think she's settled. I think she was there for a couple of years and then they moved on somewhere else again. So
yes,
at the moment.
But if I did go, it would need to be on a mission. It would have to have a very firm purpose about it. But yeah, I'd come with me by all means. But I think, ironically, of course, when I was 6 years old and mad about Skippy the Bush Kangaroo, or rather, I was mad about the series. I wanted to join the cast, so I tried to dig my way through a beach, which was probably in Wales, and to dig my way to Australia, regardless of the Earth's core and all the magma, and I was so determined to meet the cast.
It's a shame you didn't know Ick at the time, because I believe he did something very similar to get to another podcaster in America. Although when he reached their garden, he was mistaken for a garden pest and squirted with some sort of some sort of foam.
But no. I think even geographically, the time was definitely not on my side, because the show had actually, what I was watching was actually recorded in the late 60s, so I would have been very bitterly disappointed. But I had a bit of a...
Was Skippy on film? Was it on film in colour?
Still, yes, it was, yes. And I must admit, I had a bit of a dare I say, a boy crush on Gary Pankhurst. He was kind of a sort of person I wanted to hang out with, and
They must have made that knowing they were going to show it around the world, because general TV in Australia was certainly still in black and white until the mid-70s. So.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to what sort of company decided that actually it was a bit like the Trumptons and the Chigleys. So they said actually colour's the way forward. We're going to make this on film and in colour. It's interesting to see the ones that did and the ones that didn't in the 60s.
Right, let's try another word. I shall.
Yeah, we were above and beyond really with that one, didn't we? Aren't many pyramids in Australia?
Interesting one. I'm not sure. The next word we have is poison.
Poison. You go first on this one. You drink the cup first.
Thank you. I'm not sure. I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is that my mum. Obviously, I was very keen on Agatha Christie. Around the time that we met, I was writing thrillers a lot, or
you were
tending to be with sort of older characters, sort of along the lines of Miss Marple. And I do remember my mum bought me a book of poisons because she knew somebody who was writing those sorts of stories. It would be useful to know these sorts of things, or what the aftertaste might be, or what the. I don't know that I actually used it, or what became of the book.
Yeah.
Maybe they had a second thoughts and took it away again. But I do remember being bought a book of poisons. But as a 12 or 13-year-old by my mum and dad, but but it was, in a way, it was a nice show of support. Perhaps they thought as I became a teenager that perhaps it was unsafe for me to have this book.
Well, that my mother bought me some useful research material. Yes, that's pretty good. That's definitely shows solidarity.
I think that's the only thing I can, obviously I'm sure I've read many a book or seen many a TV show where, but that's the only one I can think of which is particularly linked to myself. But what about you?
Three things come to mind. Two of them. Well, three. Two of them actually my own construct. There's a bit in my 1998 film One More Bow, which you were in, where there's a line, because with the soap opera Siren Saddles, there's Chantel, who's playing one of the ghost lead characters, who comes to this convention. He's quoting a line from the series, and he said, one chalice contained a love potion, the other poison. And when I wrote it, I didn't think anything of it. But Chantel really kind of eats the furniture with the word poison, because I don't know if I directed her this way or it's just the way the scene developed, but she goes on one shoulder of Louise, who's playing the other. She goes, the love potion, and she appears on the other shoulder, and the other poison. And we had to do that shot several times because the two of them just cracked up. And even though, if you went up to Chantel these days and said poison, she might take a few beats to work out what you were talking about, but at the time, every time we saw her, we were going poison. And kind of, there's actually even a recording I've got of one of her gigs in about a month after we finished recording on One More Bow, and she does actually do the poison, because she's still on her high from the filming. The other thing is a 1986 Magnet Editor story, Magnet Editor being the series that's chronicled in my Magnet Memories book. It was a story called Hunger for Poison, which I wrote right at the beginning of 86, which is a 4-part story which kind of owes its origins to a Doctor Who story I wanted to write of a similar nature, where a community's main produce is sort of like a nutmeg thing, which it becomes poisoned. And one of the cliffhangers was based on the 5th Sapphire and Steel story, where the body falls out of the cupboard. And I, kind of tailored it round. At the time, I was rather disappointed with the way it came out, but that was that. The third thing is. Which I've shown you, is the public information film called Apaches, which I caught randomly on the farming program in 1979. It's an infamous, a very extremely well done, but very hard hitting public information film, which shows the dangers of that exist in a farm if kids are unsupervised. And one of the most harrowing ones is when these kids are playing cowboys and Indians, which you did back in the 70s. But they're pretending to take a swig of this stuff, which is it was just a bottle they found, and it turns out to be, I don't know quite what it is, some kind of fertilizer, or and the girl actually drinks a little by accident, and they say, "You're all right," and everything, and you hear her wake up in the middle of the night, kind of basically burning inside. So it's a very disturbing kind of image of poison. And I suppose the other thing is, I've probably mentioned before, but Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, which I read before I even saw or read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, has a Oompa Loompa parable, for want of a better word, on it of Goldie who eats one of her grandmother's medications and becomes ill. I remember that story affected me very deeply when I was a kid, because she was about my age, and I was really worried about kind of there's Roald Dahl would cook up these obnoxious kids which you can just enjoy being knocked down, and I was desperately worried about them because I was kind of that kind of guy. But I did worry about people dying, worry about people, characters on the telly when I was a kid. I was very oversensitive. But the poison, that's a story that I burned into my memory almost as much as Apache's, because of this kind of medication that was necessary to her grandmother but was actually made her ill, was, I think, very relevant in my mind, because my dad was ill throughout my childhood and had he had a whole picnic basket of medication which we used to take with us whenever we went on holiday, and all of which had a slight whiff to it. So I was around potential poisons throughout my childhood. So I think it was any story like that where something that wasn't meant to be ate in quantities or ate by some, I think really hit a chord with me because of that. I think that would be poison for me.
You've reminded me of one other thing to do with my own writing. Again, now, I think this was in a Roland Quaverall story. It's been such a long time, but and I think I have read or played a recording of a Roland Quaverall story on this show years ago, so it won't be totally unfamiliar if you've listened to all of our episodes. But he was a detective, and usually encountering quite quirky scenarios. But anyway, I have a feeling that there was a killer in it who wore like a poison lipstick, so it wouldn't affect their lips, but if you kissed them it would kill them. And I was very happy with that, thinking I'd come up with that out of the blue. And then not long afterwards I saw, so we are talking sort of maybe like very early 90s. Soon after that I saw an episode of Get Smart where there was a killer who had poison lipstick and kissed her, and I was really cross, because I thought, well, if anyone who ever read the story would think I'd seen something that and it's the other way around. It's very annoying.
Yeah. I sympathise. I get annoyed when certain there was a Matt Smith Christmas special where I think if something disastrous happened if you opened your presents before Christmas Day, and I was pitching that idea for an Alderbury pantomime after Sunset Warden, and I thought, oh well, there goes another. That was you might have remembered the monster. There was the baddie, and it was going to be a monster made of limescale, and it called the Limey. It's so infuriating. I mean, with me, I found that as with Magnum Memory, some of the ideas I came up with in the 70s or early 80s were being done on Doctor Who in the noughties or 2010s. I thought, oh yes, so we got there first. But it doesn't make it any easier, does it?
No, I mean, that's the thing. I've always understood that there are probably plenty of, the things that get made for TV and film it's very often the people who are in the right place, and there are lots of writers who are writing just as originally or come up with these ideas, and who might be unpublished or might only have a very small following. The fact that you get something made is a miracle, but it's not to say that you're the only person who's ever come up with that idea. You might be the only recorded. You might be the only recorded person who's, or the only example of it which someone can sit down and watch.
I mean, just look at Leonardo da Vinci in the aeroplane. I mean, if he came up with that before anybody else.
I think some.
I don't think he followed it through.
I do think some writers get quite arrogant that because they have had that success that they are somehow because their version of the story. Occasionally, I've encountered people who've had similar ideas to me, and I've tried to engage with them in a sort of, oh look, great minds think alike sort of thing, and got totally blanked. I mean, a long time ago now, 15 years ago, I did my poem Yeti Spaghetti, and more recently I saw that there was a writer who'd done a children's book called Yeti Spaghetti, and I just I mean, she wasn't I don't think she was famous particularly. I just tweeted her and went, oh, and showed her the cover of my book, and got no response whatsoever. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I'm not famous enough for her to have copied me, but you know, Yeti Spaghetti, it's a pretty obvious rhyme, and and you accept that, you know, the chances are other people will come up with it or use it, but it's funny. Like, some people take sort of, you know, usually I try and call my books things that hopefully people won't be copying because they're so
That's why I get annoyed with TV programs these days, because they have such boring titles. Boring. I've
Revenge.
Think of something bloody or sort of or Bones or Chips or you know, or sort of I don't know. And the Doctor's show. I'm not knocking doctors, but could they sort of something a bit more original?
Yeah. Well, I do find modern Doctor Who stories. When I hear the titles, I can't remember which one that one is. Often the one word, particularly the one word ones, I'm like, Praxis? I can't remember what happens in Praxis, or this one. I can't remember. I think I quite like that one. Or is that another one? Whereas I don't. You don't get with the more 60s, 70s, 80s stories. That they seem to be more. Oh right, yeah. You won't confuse that. You know, Claws of Axos. That's not. You know, that's quite, or the Monster of Peladon or something.
Well, I must admit, I wasn't a big fan of the Stephen Moffat years, but I must admit he did come up with some good titles that that stood out. Even if I didn't particularly like the episodes, they weren't memorable. Like Good Man Goes to War. That's quite a good one. But no, it's. And also, I mean, films are just as bad. I mean, Russell Crowe film, A Good Year. I mean, Russell Crowe in a title like that. Would I ever go to see that? Would I?
Sometimes they just have...
A Good Year? What sort of bloody title is that?
Sometimes they have films where it's like the name of a character, like John Smith or something, or what makes me want to go and see that? Unless you knew, it's not like James Bond, where James Bond is a character that's well established. John Smith or whatever the character is like. I mean, it wasn't as it was a proper a less common name than that, but it still made you didn't make you want to go and see it.
Also, the Bond films always, even now, they still make an effort to have exciting titles as well. Quantum of Solace was a bit weird, but and not very successful film.
It was a bit like the James Bond version of Twisting My Sobriety. What does Quantum of Solace mean?
I still don't know. I think it was the name of some sort of group which you only discovered at the very end. I thought, but No Time to Die. That's a nice lurid title. And Bond-esque. So that franchise is still making an effort with the titles.
Well, we should move on. I think we're coming towards the end of the episode, so I'm going to try a two-worder and see if that just causes confusion or whether it actually...
I don't suppose we'll be all right.
I mean, at worst, it'll just generate two different anecdotes from each of us.
Exactly.
So let's have a go. So the two words are... and they can be taken separately, together, or whatever. We've got second... and we've got dessert. Oh no, that's not dessert, that's desert. Suddenly realised there wasn't an extra S.
Second
that just
desert.
shows where
we don't need to link it, do we?
No, we don't have to, unless I think that's why I was thinking second dessert, but it's
second
not,
dessert.
It's not,
I mean, that would be.
I've definitely had one of those.
I feel quite full now.
So no, second and desert.
Desert. Do you want to start?
I think from a Doctor Who point of view, second, I think of Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor Who. that's just the way my brain is wired. Yeah, that is definitely the first thing that comes to mind. And I remember when I was a sort of a fledgling fan, and they did a repeat season of just before Peter Davison took over. So
that Five Faces.
Yeah, I remember Patrick Troughton being one of going through a stage where Patrick Troughton was my favourite Doctor. I think I find that he's a sort of more Chaplin-esque Doctor. I find it a little bit more annoying than I now, but then I used to like things like Howard Lloyd, and I'm not sure that I'd be so keen on watching them now. I guess it's you're a comedy train. I mean, I guess Doctor Who, the audience is a lot of children as well as adults, and that I had, when I was younger, that's one of the things I liked about the Second Doctor. So, but yeah, that's the second option. Desert. I've never visited a desert. I guess Carry On, Follow My Camel, or Follow That Camel is probably which is a Carry On film set in the desert. Which I remember having some good catchphrases and being quite.
I have a good ass,
And there's an on-running joke about stamping my ticket or something, which is. I haven't seen it for quite. But I went through a stage when I first met Callum in the mid to late 90s, where he would lend me a Carry On film, and I would watch it at lunchtime on a Sunday, which I was living in a house by myself. Well, there were other people, but we didn't have meals together, and I would have my lunch, and then I'd go down to the pub about 4:00 to meet Callum. So I went through a lot of the Carry-Ons, like on a week by, and also the Disney films in that sort of time. So it's probably, I probably haven't seen Follow That Camel since then, but yeah, those would be the two associations, not the most closest associations, but still. What about yourself?
I think we seconds. I have to say, I too, I like Pat Troughton's Doctor. I think the Croton, even though the Crotons was quite a so-so story, I think his Doctor appealed to me again, like yourself at the time. As bit, he had some wonderful comic things. I probably, the thing is, I rate Troughton over Pertwee as an actor, but and I like his Doctor was very, very likeable. But I have to say that I suppose because I grew up with Pertwee as the first Doctor I saw, and I love his stories perhaps more consistently than I love Troughton's, even though I like Troughton's stories. But I tend to rate Pertwee's Doctor over Troughton's, which I don't think is terribly fair of me, but there you go. But seconds, I've always liked. Now, how can I put this without sounding rude? I've always liked number twos of things. Going back to Who, I've always, during the Baker years, I always liked the second story into each season: Ark in Space, Planet of Evil, Invisible Enemy, City of Death, Pirate Planet, Meglos. I've always liked those two, that second story in. I always like second seasons. Blake 7, I think, is probably series 2 is probably my favourite. Series 2 of Doomwatch is probably my favourite, and so on and so on. But I think number 2.
Yeah, I guess
I feel good about.
Yeah, I guess you could
second things.
Yeah, you could take seconds to mean sequels, film sequels, and
absolutely,
there are a number of films that the second or the sequels are just as good, if not better than. Although it tends to be that isn't the case. That there are quite a lot.
Yeah, that's the trouble.
Quite a lot of examples where that is the case actually, and.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, as a rule to apply, it doesn't really hold up much water. But it does seem to be a recurring thing that I do like the second of each. The second season of Callan, for example, I think is better than the first. Well, maybe that's not quite fair of me because a lot of the first season is missing and it's not as long. But so yes, I feel good about those. The second, the second year into things is more established as well, and it's easier to. But with Deserts, not so defined. I mean, I did a few stories with deserts in the Magnet Editor, and there's one that was based particularly. I think I'd just seen Star Wars. There was Cure of the Melkronats, which I did shortly after seeing Star Wars in 1978, and that was a desert. And it only when I went back to write the book, I sort of went, well, hang on a minute. These guys, although they don't look like Chihuahuas, they behave like Chihuahuas, and they operate in the desert. Where did I get that from, I wonder? And also, I suppose, and I think this very much at the moment because we're rewatching The Champions on the ITC series on Talking Pictures on Sunday nights. And there's a scene where they have a few desert stories, and of course it's dear old Pinewood or Elstree or whatever, Shepperton backlot. With a bit of sand thrown in for good measure, but you're kind of thinking, deserts with ITC, yes, on the backlot, on the set. So that people sort of dying of thirst in the deserts and things like that.
I think deserts are sort of the. I tend to like places with lots of trees, so the deserts are probably if you drop me in a desert, I'd probably be in my least comfortable.
Well, I suppose you've got there's dear old cactus, but they're not very cuddly, are they? I mean, you could do a Sutton Park episode with a cactus or something.
Yeah, well, I do like cacti.
One last thing on deserts actually concerns us both, and of course. 21 years ago, you and I flew over the desert in Nirvana by name, and we saw Las Vegas as a twinkling cluster of lights remotely from afar, and realised however big Vegas is, it's a tiny speck in the desert because it's built right smack bang in the middle of the desert. It must have been an absolute pig to make for the first time, when they were first starting out. Can you imagine? Let's fly miles into the desert, and I mean, they must have brought some resources with them, because it must have been an absolute pig to build to start with, because they would have had nothing. Absolutely nothing.
And I don't know why that point was the point that they chose.
I don't know.
Was there a very, very small community there to start with? I'm not sure. I'm sure we could Wikipedia and we'd find the answer. But
yeah, I mean, I just remember the feeling that we were there in the vast desert, and also the entire week we were there. I remember seeing the horizon with the Nirvana constantly around us. You look round and you could see it completely around you, and it looked unreal. It looked like some painted backdrop on a film.
Didn't you go to the? I know I didn't come with you, but didn't you go to the hotel from Diamonds Are Forever, which wasn't quite so on the strip or something? I can't remember.
It was right at the far end of the strip. I didn't actually get into downtown in the end, but I went to what I think was that one. I was never 100% sure. It's the Hilton. It's where the Star Trek exhibition is, and I did go there, and I took some photographs of it, and it was the nearest match that I could see for the big hotel where Willard White is at the top in Diamonds Are Forever, and Connery abseils up, should I say, to meet him.
Did you walk or get a taxi? I can't remember. As I said,
I'd walk. I don't remember. The only taxi I can remember us getting is to and from the beginning airport at the beginning of the end. So I didn't take a taxi.
I did go to downtown when I went for my 30th about 3 years later, and then when I went with Dominic in about 2000 and 11 or 12, 10, whatever. He drove us from LA, and we did have a rest stop, and it's still difficult to think of that as desert with there being a motorway running through it. And,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. But yeah, I mean, so it was a really interesting experience. But no, as soon as I got home, because to beat jet lag, I kept deliberately sort of forced myself to keep awake so I could say hello to Ali when she came home from work, and I kept myself awake by watching sort of clips of Diamonds Are Forever and trying to locate all the bits we'd seen. Again, I think there's a bit in Austin Powers, the first Austin Powers movie, where he drives through Vegas. But yeah, I Circus, for example, it was a revelation to me because I assumed it was a fictional casino or fictional place that the Bond people had sort of cooked up, and they filmed everything in the studio. But no, it was a real place, and the sign is still the same as it was in 1971. So I was going, oh, right.
The third time I went there, I was inspired by, I remember seeing on the drive there, I saw two cafes either side of the road, and I wondered if there was a rivalry between them. And then I think I wrote a story about the potential, a short story about the potential rivalry between the cafes. And I can't remember if that's the same story that involved tumbleweeds that were sent to kill sort of passing sort of hitchhikers. Anyway, well, I think we probably run out of time for this episode, but I think that's been quite a fruitful.
It's got legs. It's something we could go anywhere with it. Really,
we should do another episode in the future. And,
yeah.
Well, Nick, thanks for joining in this experiment.
Pleasure. Experiment.
Yeah. And listen.
So I take the electrodes out.
Yeah, and listeners, I think we can probably give away the fact that we actually had trouble with internet connectivity during this episode. The first half of this episode was recorded about 3 or 4 days before this end of the episode.
And all I could hear in my end was,
which I'm sure.
Which is how I speak anyway.
Yes. Okay. Well, anyway, we'll join you again soon. Thanks for listening, and
yes, indeed.
We'll say goodbye for now. Bye now.
Goodbye. Bye.
So, we do have one more word to discuss before the end of the episode. I'm going to generate it now. Ooh. It's a weird one.
Here's the balls.
The word is pincer.
Pizza?
No, pincer. P-I-N...
Pincer? Oh,
P-I-N-C-E-R. I can... do you want to go first, or?
Yes. Truth is, my favourite Doctor Who monster, the Nucleus, had pincers, jagged pincers, and sure enough, a lot of the monsters I then created for the Magnus editor at the time, I was 9 at the time, had pincers. The pincers were in the thing. So I think pincers probably, rather than crabs. I've never met a crab. Well, actually, I have met a crab in Mull in 2010. There was a Sunday market, very little in Mull, but even the criminals are very polite. Yeah, somebody stole a car and they returned it the next day and said sorry. But there was a crab alive. They had a live market there, and there was a crab there. People were buying the crabs to take away and eat, and. You could almost see this crab kind of thinking, there's something very wrong here, and kind of edging away to the door. I just think that was great. But pincers, yes, I mean, very useful for monsters, for creatures, and also Ice Warriors on Doctor Who, that have pincers. But yes, I think that's the main thing with pincers. Monsters. That's what I think with monsters.
I gotta go now. Bye. Gotta go. Bye.
Goodbye, 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 goodbye.
This show is part of the Pride 48 network. Find more shows over at pride48.com.
Ooh, such mysteries.
He's crazy.
Oh, yippee!
I have a voice. I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice. We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
UnivazPods.net.
I would say when it comes to pincers, I would also be thinking of Doctor Who, but I was thinking of the Macra in the Macra Terror from the 60s. But and the Macras also were used very briefly in a David Tennant story,
Gridlock,
years later, and then more recently they've cartoonized because the Macra Terror doesn't exist other than a very short clip, and they cartoonized the whole 4-part story, and I enjoyed watching that when that was released, and it probably made the story a lot more believable having it cartoonized in a way because the cartoon was very well done, whereas I'm not sure that the original monster was supposed to have been quite so well done. But
from the clips, no, he doesn't look too clever, does he? I mean, my only, apart from the fact Mac was probably my least favourite Troughton story, but my main objection about the DVD was it was actually my favourite scene was cut out. And I have no idea why. Well, it's when Troughton, they're all in this community and they're being given groovy clothes and things like that. And the Doctor has this box, where probably, and they turn him all neat and nice. And of course, his Chaplin-esque scruffy Doctor doesn't like this, so he reverses the process and makes himself scruffed again. And he's that's better. And that's my favourite bit of the whole story. And they didn't do it.
I'm not quite sure why that couldn't be rendered. It doesn't sound that complicated.
No, I mean the stills exist, so we know exactly what it looks like. It's basically Troughton in a box, for goodness sake. I mean, it's how difficult can it be to draw a box? Sure. But that's my only objection about that.
The only thing I can think of is that they had a deadline, and but then it wouldn't. It was in an early episode, so you would have thought that would have been done earlier. But no.
I have absolutely no idea why, but no,
The other thing I can think of is there's a singer I like who I've sort of discovered last year, although she'd been around a bit longer, called Dua Lipa, and the video of her latest song. I actually forget the name of the song, but the video of it involves her singing the song like she's a chanteuse, presumably at a club. And it's a restaurant, and she's singing in front of the diners. And a lot of the video is from the point of view of the lobsters waiting to be taken to be killed, and to be cooked. And as the song goes on, the numbers go down, and then it just gets to the last lobster, and suddenly there's an alert. And suddenly water comes pouring through the restaurant, and you realise that the whole video had been set on the Titanic the whole time. And as the ship goes down, the lobster just swims away. Because actually, when I was watching to start with, I thought, this is a bit horrible. I don't really want to see these lobsters being dropped in the pan. But then it had a nice twist. It was a bit like watching some sort of Tales of the Unexpected if the lobsters or something.
Well, the other thing with lobster, on the subject of lobsters, two things. I've just been reading Michael Seeley's most excellent up-to-dated version of the Doomwatch book, which you very kindly got me for Christmas. So I've just come to the end of it now. And one of the missing stories is one called Spectrum at the Feast, where this conference is being poisoned, and the culprit turns out to be polluted lobsters, or lobsters in polluted water, which causes all these manic hallucinations. The other thing is our very first film together. Well, not the one we collaborated on writing wise. Not the very first film we did together, but Sutton Park Prison in the Sun. There was a picnic scene, and where I wrote in this lobster, and I thought, oh yeah, any old kitchen shop would have a plastic lobster we can just get out and blah 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 blah. And I could not find. There was a kitchen shop in Salisbury then, on Catherine Street, and I thought, no. Did they have no? And I went back in. Have you got a no? And I said to Keith at the time, I'm gonna go and ask them whether they've got crabs. And he's never let me live that down. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think in the end we see Lisa push aside have a look in the picnic basket and just go, ooh. So we can only assume what she was looking at. But yeah, that came to bite us in the bum with a pincer. That one that gagged it. So
that's pincers for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you still there?
Hello?
Ooh. Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me? So I'm having trouble with me connections. Hello?
Oh, hey.
Hello?
Hello? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Do you have some problems?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right. We might.
I'm having trouble with my earphones. I could only hear sort of a few words. So I thought, maybe it's the earphones. When I pulled the earphone out, I could hear you. Okay, so I've actually switched earphones, but I'm not quite sure that's done the trick.
Yeah. Oh, we'll see. We'll see what it goes.
How about now? Is that all right?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be okay now. I brought on some slightly more sophisticated earphones.
We might. I think we can start. I just need to find that thing. We might as well move on to another word. Hello and welcome. Oh dear, I've got a massive echo then. Which was weird because it's not doing it now. Why did it decide to... Okay, right, we'll start again. Hello and welcome.